I dyno'd my car to get a baseline of where it was. It made around 143 horsepower when I drove it in. I do have a stock airbox filter, so we decided to take it off and then we ran it again. It made about 150. We then let the car cool down for a bit and did a third pull, and it made 160 horsepower. It was a 91-degree day, and I'm at 772 feet from sea level, according to Siri. Hmm. 160 horsepower. Well, to be honest, more like 143-ish horsepower, because in the real world, I'm not riding around with the air filter off, and it's not like I'm waiting, 10 to 15 minutes and let my car cool down before I send it. So realistically, I'm at like 140. I could throw on the turbo kit here, but hold on now, there's a learning opportunity here, and a great conversation to be had. Let me do a fair assessment of where I'm really at and what I got. I need to do everything I can on my end to make sure this thing shines in this naturally aspirated form. And then we move on to the boost. So, a quick recap. It's a JDM B20B block, a stock crank, some Teflon-coated cast pistons, a fresh B16 head, but the VTEC is locked, it's been eliminated. GSR stock cams, B16 intake manifold, and all this is in a EG chassis, the hatchback, and a B16 short gear transmission. Oh, and 1,000cc injectors from VMI up in North Georgia. It's so I don't have to swap out injectors later on. Those pistons, I've seen some pretty crazy high compression pistons in my day, but these weren't those crazy Civic Type R high compression pistons. They were more like standard B16 pistons. It said the compression ratio would be 11.0 to 1 with the B16 head I have. But, maybe worst case scenario, my head gasket is real thick, and 10.5 to 1-ish? I don't know. Let's move on to the checklist. Okay, so a few things we gotta do right off the rip. Compression check. $180. $180. $180. $183, $182. We'll just say 180. So these things are pretty dead on across the board. So that's good. Valve lash. Okay, so it's been about 600 miles since I put this engine together. Let's readjust the valve lash. I remember leaving them a bit more looser when I initially did it. And to be honest, I'm a little confused because now that VTEC is locked, it's all together. You can't adjust them individually. One measurement now affects the other. I'll adjust for the high lobe, but then the low lobes were too tight. So, then I go back to the low lobes and adjust them, but then when I measure the high lobe, it's higher than I want it to. It's this weird back and forth, but eventually I found a good compromise. Cam gear adjustment. Adjustable cam gears are nice, but let's set them back to 0 for now. Maybe in the future I'll get into, adjusting the cam gears, and do fine-tuning stuff, but not now. I set the ignition timing to 16 degrees. I switched my distributor out not too long ago because I was having problems with it, and when I put it back on, I didn't really pull out the timing light and set the adjustment properly. And now that I did, I realized that it was a little retarded. But now that we're on this topic of ignition timing, something caught my eye. My dyno graph. So it dipped a little around 5,500 RPMs. But see, at 5,000 it's good, 6,000 it's good, but 5,500 it's weird. It gets kind of flat and it doesn't continue going up. So I pulled up my ignition table on my S300, and it just so happens that there's a weird dip in timing at around the same RPM. Interesting. For some reason, my timing dipped, and so did my power. What to do? And it's not by much either. You know, adjusting your timing table without a dyno isn't really a good idea, but God, I just couldn't help myself. It's only a little bit. I'm gonna just even it out. And to be honest, before I even did this, I pulled up a Type R ignition table, a GSR, and even an LS table. And if we look at the legendary Type R, at around 5,500 RPMs on the high cam, of course, it's at 29 degrees, you know, from 29 to 30 at full throttle. The GSR is 23 degrees at around 5,500 RPMs. At 5,700, it jumps to 26, but then at 6,000, it's back up to 29. And lastly, the LS ignition table, if you look at the low table, you know, obviously, because LSs, they don't have VTEC, this table does this thing where at 4,500, it's at 29 degrees. Then at 5,000, it drops to 28 degrees. And then it goes back to 29 degrees at 6,000. Interesting. Even the conservative LS is running a bit more timing than me, because I'm at 27 degrees at full throttle. You know, 27, 27.5, maybe 28. So I think I'm okay, because at the end of the day, I'm running less than the not so aggressive LS engine. I'm not in the 30s yet, and I think I'll be okay. I could give it more, but I really don't have a dyno to measure my results to see if it's really helping. The best I can do is street tune, you know, get good air fuel ratios across the board, and then go pay somebody to do 2 or 3 dyno pulls and just read the graph at the end. Now we move on to the air filter. You know, to be honest, there are 2 things I love about this car. One, oh man, is having that inner timing belt cover. I love this thing. It looks so nice. I actually ordered this. It happens to be a genuine Honda part. It's pretty expensive. I couldn't find it at a junkyard or used. I just got it brand new. See, the thing is that most people that do LS VTECs or B20 VTECs, they never put this thing back on. At most, they'll put the outer timing covers, but they'll never go through the trouble of putting the inside one on. They just decide to run the timing belt exposed. Nothing wrong with that. That's cool. But I like it covered. The second thing I love most about my car is the fact that I still have the stock Honda airbox. But after seeing that 7 horsepower increase by just taking off the airbox, I'm gonna give in and just put in one of those racing filters for the purposes of this little dyno experiment. I mean, obviously I know replacing it and putting a racing air filter would make power, but it's something about the aesthetic of that stock airbox that it looks nice. Next on the list is just touching up and doing some street tuning again. Mainly focusing on full throttle air fuel ratios. did this for a little bit, made sure that it didn't lean out or it didn't get too rich at full throttle. And after I was satisfied, I called it a day, and back to the dyno it is to see where we're at. And we go back to the dyno. Same location and similar temperatures. Now, before all this, I was trying to make sense of horsepower numbers. I was aware of brake horsepower and wheel horsepower, but this whole corrected and uncorrected horsepower and SAE and all this, it was new to me. So I read this long-ass article online, but more importantly, I asked those who have more knowledge in that field to see how they can explain it to me in a way where I could understand it. All right, so we're here at
Power Racing. I'm Craig.
The man himself. So Craig, when it comes to dyno numbers,
Yeah.
Some people are familiar with the horsepower from the crank and horsepower from the wheels.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the actual horsepower from the wheels, there's this thing about the whole like corrected and uncorrected.
Yeah.
Like, can you explain a little? Yeah, can you explain a little bit what that is?
Your engine horsepower, what to make it the engine. This is what it takes to the ground. You got standard correction factor, SAE correction factors, uncorrected. I run it just a standard correction factor just because I use the same thing on everything, because if you're tuning on something, you always want to use the same so you get the same result, same repeatable results. I guess you'd say variables, no variables. You want the same thing that every time you dyno your car. But standard correction, it adjusts for weather, barometric pressure, humidity, all that kind of thing.
The difference between, I guess you'd say, uncorrected and corrected. Would it be fair to say that the corrected is more of a real life scenario, real world scenario, or which one will be more accurate, or is that something that's kind of gray?
I've always used just a standard correction factor. To me, that's the most accurate. It's like you can run it uncorrected today in heat, it's going to make 10 or 15 less horsepower because it's hot outside. But if it was 30 degrees outside, it might show 10 or 15 less, or more, because it's cold outside and it's not correcting back down to that variable. But yeah, just standard correction factor on everything and keep the same thing. So if you're tuning on something, you always keep that same correction factor. It makes it easy.
Okay. So, and one last thing. So if I were to roll up here with a Mustang or something, and it made exactly 250 horsepower, and then I were to leave and come back in the middle of December and have nothing done to the car,
as long as you have
and
the correction factor on standard,
again,
it should make the same horsepower.
Okay.
Now, if you were running it uncorrected on that pole and then uncorrected on this pole, there's going to be a difference in numbers.
That's what I kind of was.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it is corrected, it does compensate for
the different correction factors. Some of them read different. Like if you got something running as standard correction and you switch it to SAE, it might read. I mean, if you're making 200 horsepower, it might read 10 horsepower, 5 horsepower less or something.
Okay.
It depends.
So let's just say I come in with that Mustang and I wanted to show off to my friends. I would come in and get a dyno run uncorrected today when it's hot, and then
it's gonna read a little low.
It's gonna read low, right?
In the winter,
and then I'd come back in the winter, and we run it uncorrected. I would have technically more power, correct? According to the
Correct. Yeah.
But realistically, we know that's not the case, because
it's just like you use weather, humidity, and all these different things to. The correction factor, all it is a multiplier that pretty much will put it back to where it would be in regular weather.
Well, I appreciate you giving me this information and letting me come here and, dynoing. And yeah, give us a little bit of information. So where are you and where can they find out more?
Atlanta, Stockbridge, Georgia. We're right off of Eagles Landing Parkway, Hudson Bridge. So just look us up. Craig Weaver Automotive, Power Racing. We're here 6 days a week. So, any dynos, tuning, anything like that, we got you.
The first dyno pool were at 171 horsepower. That is an improvement, it is better than the last number. But hold on, let's really ask ourselves, what changed? What did we do? Well, the valve lash, it was a lot loose, now it's within spec. and also the ignition timing. This isn't supposed to be a dyno tune, it's just supposed to be a dyno pool. But Craig, he was really awesome. He said, hey, if you want in between the pools, you can go ahead and, change your settings and add timing or fuel if you want to. So what I did was I added 2 degrees of timing. So we were at 27.5 to 28 degrees at full throttle. That's where we got 171. I added 2 degrees and we went up to 173 horsepower. And then I added 2 more degrees and I took a little bit of fuel away because I was starting to get a little rich. And ultimately we got up to 174 horsepower. Now what timing are we running at 174? Between 30 to 31. $174. That's a number I could live with. I'm glad I decided not to just throw on the turbo kit, but rather do a few things to try to squeeze every little bit I can out of this. Is there more I can do? Possibly. Am I going to do that? No, I'ma just throw the turbo kit on.